of your show.
This was not staged. I'm sad to say I've shed more than a few tears over broken hermit crabs, dehydrated frogs, overfed goldfish, runaway rabbits, neglected lizards. I do like the idea of having a classroom pet that can actually be in the classroom all the time. Crickets. Super easy to care for, interesting to watch, and they don't have a long life expectancy anyway. So I'm going to take you along on my journey as I seek to determine, would crickets make a good first pet for toddlers? I'm going to try this during the summer where I have smaller class sizes. I'm not an entomologist, but I did work in a pet store where one of my jobs was taking care of crickets, and I don't think crickets have changed much since I was in college, so you can do your own research, but this is what I'm going with. Okay, I've got the cricket keeper, which I often see these at Goodwill. I didn't when I went shopping today, but I bet if you just put word out, you could probably get a hold of one of these for less than $10. But anyway, this was $10. Then I've got a natural sponge, so one that hasn't been treated with any sort of, anti-mildew or insecticide or anything that might harm a cricket. So just a completely natural sponge. That will be the water source in addition to food that contains water. Since we buy playground sand by the 50-pound bag for our classroom, and I do believe it is also safe for crickets, we're just going to use some of that. Playground sand, and because they are omnivorous, I'm putting out some dog food. All right, and then here are our little crickets. Okay, let's go ahead and set it up. All right, I decided to give them a little extra water. It's very shallow because crickets can drown. And that would be sad. All right, so keeping the sponge moist will be one of my toddler students' work to do. We'll call it Practical Life Care of the Crickets. For now, I'm just going to add one stick because I think my students will really enjoy setting up the habitat. I would have done this whole process with them, but unfortunately there were only boxed crickets, and these have been in the box since June 30th. I really didn't want to make these crickets wait much longer. I really just want to dump them. Okay, so I thought these were little sponges. That's actually little cricket food, so I'll leave that in there. Okay, we'll have to see how this goes, whether I'll need to reinforce this latch. And it appears that all the crickets were alive. I didn't find any dead crickets, so hooray. Now I've just got to decide where in my classroom the crickets will live. I don't really have an obvious place. I want it somewhere low enough that they can observe them if they just want to walk by and observe the crickets. And I want it low enough that they can carry the container by themselves if they're actually going to choose to take care of the crickets. I might have to get one of those little insect catchers. Oh. I need help catching crickets. The lid popped off. Okay, a bunch went in this bucket. That's good. Okay, so the weight of the sand, I think, made this pet carrier too heavy to support these little latches. And take the handles off somehow, and then I can just give the children the lesson on carrying the cricket habitat like this. Okay, so the habitat is a little worse for the wear, but I think the crickets survived. All right, so we're at the end of 2 full weeks with the crickets and the students, and they do really seem to like observing them and making sure the sponge is wet and watching them crawl around, and they hide a lot, so we like to kind of figure out where they might be hiding and why. And it's been fun to see them grow, and we can see some have their ovipositor, so we know there's some females in there. They're not attached enough to want to name them, which is probably a good thing since they have a short lifespan, but they'll walk by the shelf and they'll stand there for quite a while observing and discussing the crickets. I will say the younger 2-year-old set seems to be the most interested in them, and that makes sense because the 1-year-olds are in that sensitive period to small objects, so they really like walking by. They'll catch their attention as they're crawling around, but the older ones like observing them as well. So for the time and cost that it takes to do a cricket setup, I would definitely give it a big thumbs up for a classroom pet for a toddler classroom, or for a first pet for a toddler. When I mentioned this video to a few friends, they're like, no one is going to want insects in their classroom, but I disagree, and I think they're a great pet. And the crickets say goodbye too.